As was predicted earlier this week, the charges against the Trump org and at least one of the individuals involved there are coming. We don't know the exact content necessarily, perhaps it will break during this show, but this morning, Donald J. Trump's long-serving chief financial officer, Allen Weisselberg, surrendered to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Prosecutors are expected to unseal an indictment later in the day against both Mr. Weisselberg and the Trump organization. So you've probably heard his name in the news over the past few years, but if you haven't, he served as the Trump organization's financial gatekeeper for more than 2 decades and recently ran the business with Mr. Trump's adult sons by certain definitions while Mr. Trump was in the White House. So as a part of the inquiry that's been ongoing, prosecutors in the office of the district attorney, Cyrus Vance Jr., have been examining whether Mr. Weisselberg failed to pay taxes on valuable benefits he and his family received from Mr. Trump, including private school tuition for at least one of his grandchildren, free apartments, and leased cars. So we're expecting that that's going to be a part of what's revealed later on today. We don't know all the details yet, but we do know that according to Weisselberg's lawyers, he intends to plead not guilty and he will fight these charges in court. So, Adrienne, again, with all those, we don't know certain details of this. So those caveats are out there. What do you think about this? What do you expect to come of this, if anything?
Oh, I think they're trying to essentially push up on Weisselberg to get him to flip on Trump. Because generally, prosecutors do not bring charges for failure to pay taxes on fringe benefits. That is a rarity. This is pretty unprecedented. Because only when these charges are brought, it's part of a larger case. So it's kind of like an add-on. So the fact that they are bringing these charges in isolation, what that tells us is the prosecutors are probably trying to get Weisselberg to flip in some way so that they can build out a larger case against Trump and Trump's organization.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It's also the case that's being made by the Trump organization that put out a statement saying that Mr. Weisselberg is being used as a pawn in a scorched earth attempt to harm the former president. I think that's probably a part of it, certainly. I mean, certainly he's being used as a pawn insofar as they're trying to use him to get more information. And I definitely think that some of the people involved in this probably wouldn't mind harming the former president. If they're rational people, they should have that as a goal in their life. I do. That said, Trump organization has almost certainly broken so many laws. The thing that bothers me so far, Adrienne, I don't know what you think about this, is that the stuff that they're describing, like that has to be the least significant law breaking that's going on in the Trump organization. If things are happening, paying taxes on his Benz seems like a small thing in comparison to all of what at least has been alleged by people like Michael Cohen about insurance fraud and the devaluation and then overvaluation of real estate, tax issues and all that. This seems like one of the most minor things. But my question to you is, I don't know what the potential penalties for this sort of thing are. If the goal is to get him to flip, does this seem like enough potentially to do that, considering that Donald Trump has said that Weisselberg is like 100% loyal for a long time? He would never turn on me.
You know, it makes me think of Al Capone and the fact that there were a lot of things he did, but he got busted on tax evasion. So, the thought that someone who is engaged in far more criminality only gets busted for something little is very much a federal prosecutor's kind of way in to really get them and get them good. And so Weisselberg being what I believe 73 years old, he may actually face some kind of considerable punishment in the event that he's convicted, because one thing we do have to consider is how many instances of the potential criminality are possible. So even if this fringe benefits, it only carries, let's say, possibly maybe a year in prison, then if there are 20 instances of that, hey, you never know if a judge wants to go ahead and make it consecutive instead of concurrent, then you could spend the rest of your twilight years, in an 8x8 cell on the bottom bunk. So the thought that Weisselberg could potentially turn on his bestie Trump, it'll be interesting, especially since we all know Trump and he could possibly turn on Weisselberg. Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, just judging by the photo that we brought up of him, he doesn't seem like he's made for spending the rest of his life in prison. I imagine it's tough for everyone, obviously, but yeah, perhaps. Wouldn't it be weird if he spends the rest of his life in jail for not paying taxes on his Benz or whatever, but Cosby's out?
Well, there's also like, I guess there's also potential evidence that essentially his son was getting a Manhattan apartment and a full salary while we're working at the Trump Organization ice rink in Central Park. It's like there seems to be a bunch of money funneling through using these things that aren't being covered as taxes. And so, Weisselberg, he's been around for a long time. He probably knows where the bodies are buried and participated in burying them. He might really be like, I ain't going down for this sucker. No, I'll go ahead and I'll rat out. You never know.
We'll see. I mean, look, I'm sure he'll want to if it'll save him. The thing is, I can't imagine that Trump had anything to do with any of this. Totally clean, that guy. He's not gonna get involved in financial impropriety, trying to defraud the government potentially to make money. Why? He doesn't need to. He's a billionaire. Why would he be so petty financially?
Good. Oh, wow. You know what? That's a really good point. And I also think that Weisselberg, he could go in full Shawshank this. Like he could go into prison and just do Andy Dufresne style. He could be doing taxes for guards and actually live pretty well. You never know.
It's been a very long time since I watched that, but I think I understand the reference.
You're killing me, man.
I know. I need to rewatch it.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.